My name is Anya Kreitney, and I'm a program specialist with the library's Literary Initiatives team. In our office, we are always thinking about new books and fun, probing conversations. Our goal is to champion authors' original concepts and trumpet their bright flashes of creativity. That's why I'm so excited that we're expanding our Live at the Library poetry series with Robin Schiff here today, a bold artist with expansive telescopic vision. Tonight, Robin will be joined by the ever-charming Washington Post critic Ron Charles as our moderator. Ron will lead us, you will see, with kindness, skill, and grace, covering Robin's most recent title, Information Desk, an Epic. I don't have my, hold it up for us, would you? There it is. A book of poems tracking Robin's time as a docent at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Let me spoil one thing for you. Information Desk is a true achievement, a work of precision and wild looping tangents. As you might guess, a book about a museum interrogates the art world, paying special attention to legacy, class, even bodily autonomy. And lest that sound too serious, the book is surprising and filled with tiny yet mighty creatures like wasps, beetles, and parasitic microbes of all variety. This book is funny and lovingly self-deprecating. I can't wait to hear what this conversation uncovers. But before I turn over the mic, I would be remiss if I didn't explain the handouts at your tables. Robin's journey inspired us to create something fun in what we're calling a poetry cafe. Since we are a research library filled with our own docents and curators and archivists and preservationists, we have taken questions that you, the public, have asked of our science reference librarians, and we've placed those answers to those questions on your tables. But of course, this is a poetry event, so we invite you to use the text from those answers to create your own poem. Strike out words you don't need, add words you wish were there, have some fun with it. You'll also see that there is an origami sheet of paper also on your table, and when you're through with your poem, we encourage you to fold the paper into a pocket. You can place your poem in the pocket, and by doing so, you'll help us celebrate National Poetry Month and an early 2024 Poem in Your Pocket Day, which is officially on April 18th, so we're a little early. Last little tidbit, we selected questions that loosely relate to the themes in Robin's book, so please don't forget to buy a copy in the back of the room here so you can unlock even more meaning from our event. So, let me just all remind you to turn off your phones, and without further ado, Robin and Ron.
Thank you so much, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I've been chasing you around the museum all week. It's been a pleasure to spend so much time with this book. Toward the end of this remarkable book, you write, "I live in poems."
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I find that I am happily confused between what is my real lived life and what is my lived life on the page. That there's a way of reckoning with being human and the experience that I have. As I put it in a poem, that becomes very wound up with what I actually lived. So I'm not, and many of the poets who I love have so much of their life in their poems, and I wonder which is one of them artificial and one of them the authentic life. I think it's the same thing.
Fascinating. This is a very exciting challenge for me because we've never done an epic poem before in this series. We usually do collections, and then I would ask, would you read this poem, would you read this poem? But here we've got one book, one long poem-length book, an epic about working at the information desk at a museum. And if writing poems is brave, writing an epic poem seems heroic. How did this job come about? Let's start with
the job. Okay.
Biography first.
Okay, so I'd gone to college. I was at Sarah Lawrence, which is not far from New York City. Moved to the city and started, as one did at that time, temping and looking for a job. And I thought, I'll get a job in publishing because I thought that's what young writers were supposed to do. And the experience of looking for a job was so overwhelming. And thinking about myself as beginning a career, all I wanted to do was, write poems and read. That's what I wanted wanted to do. It turns out that's not a job. So I would go to, I went to one temp job and got fired halfway through the day because I guess I'd misrepresented my typing speed.
On the first day?
Well, their temp jobs are only a day long sometimes,
you
but
didn't
it
make
could
it.
have gone further. But they said, you know, I don't think that we need you. And I would find myself not taking the temp jobs I was supposed to go to, or if I was invited to leave early, I just wanted to go to the Met. And it's just a beautiful place to hide. Going home would have felt like a defeat. I would feel unemployed. Going to the Met felt like I was in charge of my education and I could give myself to this. So at this time in the history of civilization, ads for jobs were in the newspaper. Wow. And I saw an ad and it said Met guards needed.
Guards.
Guards, yeah. So I applied to be a guard at the Met, and they hire in a sort of a school. They hire a number of people at a time so that they can come in and get trained together. And my appointment for my interview happened to be late in the week because I'd procrastinated, which is not my nature, but I'm very happy that I did then, because when I arrived at the Met for my interview, my interlocutor said, these positions are full, but we have another job that you might be qualified for. Would you like to interview to work at the information desk? And yes, I did.
Were you qualified?
It didn't take much, and this was a very different time in labor. Everybody who was a college graduate who was looking for a job got snapped up into media at the time. It was web stuff was just starting, and if you were avoiding tech and writing content, as I sort of was, then I was like sort of the only one around who was willing to take this very low-paying job. Although I loved it, I think I made $17,500 in my first year. And so that was the salary, which I think is funny, and I like to repeat it. And I lived in New York on that.
Wow. And
yeah, this is a different time.
was it like the way dancers take jobs as waitresses, where the job had nothing to do with what you wanted to do, or did the two start to mesh a bit?
Oh, they meshed immediately.
Really?
I was a poet.
Yes?
I've been a poet since I am, and I was a poet since I'd been a child.
And you're sitting at this
I
desk.
knew the minute I sat down there that I would have material for the rest of my life. And I did. And there are poems about that work and about those experiences and all the sort of power plays that one would imagine in the history of collecting. It's really all I write about.
Wow. And
even if I'm pretending not to.
And when did you think, this job at the information desk at the museum, I should write an epic poem about it?
Okay, so that's many, many years later. Okay. It's my fourth book. I've written, ekphrastic poems along the way and thought about how the objects in the museum had inspired me many times, but I'd always had in the back of my brain of wanting to write much more directly about my time working at the information desk. And it was sort of I started writing the poem, and I knew it would be, I like long poems anyway. I knew I was interested in the long form, and one of the reasons you call it heroic to write an epic, I think it's heroic to write a short poem. I just do not know how that's done, and the history of the lyric to me is a history of heroes who were able to get in and get out. And I can't stand the feeling of between poems. So I thought if I just keep writing, I don't have to face that silence that I'm not happy in. And then I started this poem, and it came up in the course of conversation that I said to somebody, oh yeah, I'm writing an epic. And then I thought that was hilarious. Yes. And it was a long joke between me and me for a long time, until I said to myself, okay, it's on. I'm really doing this. And I think I mean it very tongue-in-cheek.
At one point you say, this is just a poem on the subject of exhibition. But that is not true at all. This is a poem about many, many things. This is a poem about so many things. Later you write, truth and lies and art are twisty business. So is this poem.
Yeah.
It is a very twisty poem. So how did you conceive of the shape of this, and how did it not become like really ungainly and impossible to deal with?
I think it is. I don't think that I dealt with that. I think I leaned into it. All of my books, I deploy a form that is counting of syllables. So I love Marion Moore, who is a modernist poet who brought that to the 20th century. And so for a long time as a poet, I was counting how many syllables are in each line, and there would be an arbitrary reason, plan, and I would follow it. In this poem, I came up with a little bit more of an intentional syllabic strategy, and that is that every stanza is the amount of syllables of the age I was when I wrote it. So and that's what kept me focused. So the museum is sprawling, the poem is long, but each stanza is a sort of a thumbprint of a moment in time. So I was 44 when I started the poem, so early in the book, each stanza is 44 syllables long, but the lines could be, it's pretty, modular in a way, so the line breaks could be anywhere, but the stanza itself. And it took a long time to write. I did not know how long it would take, and I moved houses, I moved jobs, the pandemic intervened,
Right.
the political situation changed, and it turned out to take many years. And I gave myself a syllable for my birthday each year. And then I had because when you are a poet and nobody cares what you're doing, which is the great beauty of being a poet, you can make up your own rules and you can change them as you go. So I decided that I would spend that new gift of a syllable however I wanted to as time passed. So when you're writing a poem, as you may know, you revise obsessively. So I might go back to a stanza that had 44 syllables in it and give myself 2 extra syllables to work with, which is a lot in the poetry real estate. That's a lot of word you can add. And so it changed things. It's a kind of reconfiguration. So,
Wow. So there's tremendous discipline in the number of syllables.
yeah.
But then tremendous freedom in the
No
whole,
discipline.
no discipline in the whole length. You write, when newly hired, I was sent into the galleries with a checklist to familiarize myself with possessions I might be asked by a visitor to point out on a map. But the job does not go that way at all. I want you to read a section for us about the way it usually went.
Okay. I can't wait to see what passage this is going to be. This is the best thing. Okay. And so the day begins. A guard unlocks a row of doors, crowds enter, and I am information, not so much behind as within the desk, a property of the fact of the collection, and catechism commences. Where's the bathroom? Where's the bathroom? Can you direct me to the men's room, to the Elgin Marbles? Is there a bag check? Who's your daddy? Are those your real breasts? Why is there an entry fee? What is a suggestion? Am I not a taxpayer? Where's the bathroom? A payer of state and city taxes? Am I not a slayer of men, same as Napoleon who stole the needle erected just behind us, called Cleopatra's, a misnomer and obtained diplomatically in the city's public grass? One just like it sits in the path Marie Antoinette was led down to be beheaded. Wayfaring is what we call moving visitors through the building.
Is that pretty true?
That is 100% true. Yes, that is and then there'll be an amazing transcendent question. Like, an hour of telling people how to find the restroom, and then somebody will be like, I have a favorite 18th century painting that I've been studying my whole life. How do I find it? And you get to do that too.
Nice, nice. In 1995, the Met staged a show called Rembrandt, Not Rembrandt.
They did.
And early on, that show becomes a touchstone in the poem. Can you tell us about the exhibit?
Yes.
Some of us might have seen it, but not everybody.
Yeah, it was. It happened to be what was mounted when I was hired, and one of the jobs with my clipboard and my checklist was to know what was in the museum, and we were asked where the special exhibitions were all the time, and might be asked other questions about them. And this show that I went to see many times was a really curatorial, scholarly show. It was the opposite of enjoying the Impressionists. Instead, this was a group of paintings that had been attributed to Rembrandt and whose attribution was in question. So there were definitely verifiable Rembrandts hanging, but also work that had been over the years considered a Rembrandt or not, and all of it was up for reconsideration at that time by the curators. And there would be these long wall texts about whether or not it's Rembrandt and why. And I do not have a history, a background in art history, and this was just fascinating to me. I'd never thought about it, and I thought that we knew who painted what, and that if we found out it wasn't authentic, that it would stay in that category of not attributed to whoever the artist is. I had no idea that things go back and forth, and that conservation and the history of art history and curatorial eye, you know, that these things are flowing and that it's an open question. And so I started really thinking about, well, if we think it's a Rembrandt and a curator 50 years ago thought it was a Rembrandt and a curator 100 years ago thought it was a Rembrandt, okay, it's not by a guy named Rembrandt, but what makes it not a great painting? Like, what did it mean to be in contact with something that's supposed to, it's just the word Rembrandt, I'm like supposed to be moved by this, and I am, but I started to question what it means to be original, and some of this was paintings by people known now as followers of Rembrandt, so they didn't, and we don't know their name other than that, so they didn't come up with the kind of painting that was considered innovative at its time. So this led me on a sort of curatorial, now, like writing the book, not at the time. At the time I read it and sort of, you know, I think I say in the book that I ate it for lunch. I just wanted to consume this. And I thought I would be a better observer of the world and thus a better poet if I could figure out whether the painting was a Rembrandt
You
or
could
not.
make these
If I could figure this out or at least follow the argument. And you can't follow the argument. It doesn't work that way. But I thought I would understand what authenticity meant. And I was asking myself this in my 44th year, not my 24th year,
right,
at a moment in history where the truth, and it still is, was very much up for interpretation. And a version of the truth is being, you know, sort of peddled as veracity. And I just thought, I've lived my life saying Rembrandt, not Rembrandt, as code for what is real and what's the difference between these things.
It makes the museum seem much more unstable than we think of it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're so right.
Would you read, with that background, listen to this where she introduces this idea and talks about it in the poem.
Thank you. Okay. Rembrandt, not Rembrandt, 1995 was the first special exhibition I attended as museum employee. Paste it with the proprietary edge of a paid informant. Submit everything to the binary. It had the stiff infrared soul of connoisseurship. Rembrandt, not Rembrandt, that's the question. Posed it like a strobe with the typesetter's solidus, the forward slash, a force field between who did and who did not make it, without that indecisive human or Milton imposes between the given and the made. Eve withdrawing from Adam with such gardening tools as art yet rude, guiltless of fire had formed, or angels brought. Choose a side, poet. Which is it, Eve or God who forged the hoe? Forgery, 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 flash, flash, flash. I said to myself, if you have to ask. But I stood before each painting eating half shadow, umber, and ochre every day for a month of lunch hours trying to know. The handling of the built-up impasto is itself a valid argument against, writes the curator, Walter Liedtke, in the exhibition catalog, forgery, and yet a few paintings over, Portrait of a Man, The Auctioneer. It is surprising how successful the unknown painter was in imitating Rembrandt's manner in the light effects of the sitter's left cuff. And so I came to love that cuff, its lace and dust, and love the wrist that cuff suggests, obscured here in the painting by the ledger the auctioneer is holding, on which the trembling value of what? Some cows suggests a field in mind where a calf moves in the shadow of a barn, the hot smell of manure and mulch, a bull. How much is it all worth? Self-portrait of the young artist as auctioneer with your checklist and radiant left cuff that Rembrandt couldn't have better lit. I see you. I think I touched that cuff and more at a keg party in Sloanham Woods and sensed its tragic aptitude, counterpart to your dull right wrist, lacking the vision of an artist's truth. Is that the word? Truth? Follower of Rembrandt, I followed you into the blue woods, but I changed my mind. Thank you.
It seems like such an old, academic, obscure, complicated issue, and yet here we are. I mean, obsessed with authenticity and deep fakes, and we're about to have
that's right.
we're about to have an election where we don't know the videos we're seeing of Biden are really Biden or not. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff like this. So, how did all that anticipate what we're dealing with now?
It turns out that these are just old issues. It turns out that when you're, in a collection like the Met, it's full of the history of power, and all of this kind of surfaced. But I started this poem in an angry mood a couple of administrations ago. I wrote a particularly angry poem I finished it during the Kavanaugh hearings, that there was poetry. It doesn't feel like it right now, but I always tell my students poetry is a great place to hide, that you can pack anything you want in there, and that there's something of a veil, and you don't have to show how it all comes together and what it means. But to me, some of the fun was surfacing in any of this art what is relevant today and why it continues to be meaningful.
The point you make about binaries in there,
Yeah.
which becomes a really complicated and interesting part in the poem, slipping from Rembrandt to not Rembrandt to authentic and not authentic, and then we get male and female, innocent and guilty. You push back very slyly on those binary choices, and you end with a follower of Rembrandt. You follow the follower, you say.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you mean by that? What does it mean
don't
to
know.
follow the follower?
That's a great
Rembrandt?
question.
To prefer the imitation. These aren't really
I was-
imitations, are they?
No, I don't know. I don't think we know enough about them to know if they're imitations. Some of them come from the studio of, some of them are in the style of, they're not forgeries exactly. No one
was passing them off.
They weren't passing them off as a Rembrandt. They were just writing painting in the moment of Rembrandt, and it's thought to have been a Rembrandt, it left the studio, it was painted in, and ended up somewhere. I think I have an interest in the outsider, the almost was, the one that didn't get the fireworks don't go off, but that there's some deep troubled soul of those of us who, it's all poets who make work, and it's not the centerpiece of our culture. Artists are all in the margins. It's not on CNN, right? It's like that I was just interested in how far into the margin I could follow somebody, but then it's all there's danger there too.
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
The dangers. Contending with masculine power and privilege is another huge theme in the poem. For instance, the poem begins hilariously with Balzac masturbating in public.
It does, I'm sorry.
We won't read that part. One of the recurring characters throughout the poem is this creepy guard who's always following you around the museum and then gives you a poster, which there's some sort of obligation being built up there that you're resisting, but you kind of want the poster. Later he's fired and accused of date rape. All this goes on in this poem, which is supposed to be about the museum. And you observe that term date rape seems so new then, but as a phrase was coined in 1973, so technically as old as me. We grew up together in the semi-finished basements of the suburbs. That is a really funny and horrible line. Elsewhere you say, I could not find my no. I had been raised to only ever very gently adjust a gentleman. Those are really painful confessions.
I think women of my generation thought that the feminist movement had happened and had been resolved, and that we got our jobs and we felt like we earned them and we could keep them and so we would be fine. And it was really, I had no idea, and all the women here know, that when you actually enter the workforce, stuff happens that you weren't prepared for. Because I think that that's a different generation now, and there's a different expectation. But at that time, it was just silent. So there was stuff happening in the microcosm of the information desk, and then at every ring outside of it, and of course all over the artwork, and all over the history of the collecting of that artwork,
Right.
all about gender dynamics and rape and all of this.
And it goes right from you sitting at the desk with someone fiddling with one of your legs, which is so gross, to the way the collection has been constructed over the centuries. I mean, from the microcosm to the whole building.
Yeah, it was, I guess one of the challenges and the sort of the fun, if that's a word I can use here, it doesn't seem appropriate, the intellectual challenge was to write about what was literally happening and also know that I was speaking metaphorically about a larger culture. That if it could happen, in that, right in public privacy,
Right.
in the middle of the hall, it was happening everywhere else, all over, not just the museum, but it just I like to think in this book of locating the center of the world and all of power dynamics at that desk, which I pretend is like almost the center of the target, and that it could radiate out from there.
How did that play into your life as a poet, as a young woman trying to become a poet, trying to be taken seriously in a world where, it was easy for male professors and male publishers to treat you dismissively at one time? I mean, I still think that goes on, but how did you push back against that?
Oh, I don't know. Did I? I don't. That's a good
Are you?
question. I don't know.
You are.
I don't know. I think you've silenced me.
A process of getting more and more confident over the years?
and I think that it is my answer is still that poetry is a great place to hide, and that I could just put anything I wanted into a poem, and that I would be expressive and saying all the stuff that was important,
Right.
but that it was not explicit. I didn't have to. This is a very straightforward book that does say it.
Does.
I don't want to say it names names, but it almost does. And there are ways of writing a poem without doing that. Where I've always been writing about dynamics and power, and to me that's my pleasure. And sort of, some of these poems are not about humans. They're about insects, and I tried to pack ways of thinking about gender and power into that too, which is much more, I think, typical of my writing before this book.
I love this passage. When someone tells me he's inspired, I usually take it to mean someone else does his dishes and laundry. Or at the very least, cleans under the couch where the muses visit him disguised as students.
I have an academic job.
Yeah. It's such an indictment of the kind of sexism that runs through those things. I wonder if you'd read a passage here. To appalling extent.
Thank you. Okay. To appalling extent, stewardship is also the entitlement with which 8-year-old Roy Fairchild claims it's as much mine as anybody's when asked by Laura in Delta Wedding, "Is that your boat?" Colonialism and the whole undertaking in a hull. The swagger of him, spitting and peeing off the edge of the commandeered skiff. That's not in the book, but you know this kid. I have an 8-year-old. Little shits like Roy grow up on playgrounds, peeling off their shirts and stuffing them into their waistbands where they catch the breeze like dirty flags of American boyhood. Cocky Winslow Homer bullies seating the seats of the classroom with thumbtacks, who dare one another to eat live fish, whitewash each other's aunts' 9-foot fences, and invented a game called Snap the Whip, in which the grinning row of barefoot princes of Americana link hands in embodiment of an eponymous living whip that ripples up the playground, sacrificing its outermost segments like the downsizing, automatizing worms that inspire collective corporate layoffs, the cast-off heirs of which are right now climbing up the ladle sides of playground slides all over America, while smaller boys are sliding down them. Released from their lessons, so says the exhibition, exuberant barefoot boys engage in a spirited game of snap the whip, which required teamwork, strength, and calculation, all important skills for a reuniting country. For teamwork, say collusion. And what a lavish scorn, exuberance, that drives these pale postbellum punks whose mothers are still crying over their older brothers' war-dead bodies to take the field 8 across like a row of chessboard thugs in formation of an advancing line they named a whip in the name of domination over every animal and human, including one another and themselves.
Thank you. The way you move from little boys to corporate executives, and a sense of privilege that runs through that line, is awesome and sobering. And as a mother, as you confess, of a little boy, much of whose upbringing will be conducted by forces beyond you.
That's terrifying.
Okay. How do you keep him from becoming one of these assholes that you describe in the poem?
I have no idea. You tell me.
You've got to figure this
the
out.
people who know nice men have to. I don't know. We talk a lot about respect in the house, and drawing attention to things that it's such a fine line. I treat my son like a prince, but I don't want his partner to do that one day. I don't know. I think that the answer is a lot of chores, and I need to step it up.
And yet so many of the great artists were, encouraged and coddled, and
Yes.
we wouldn't have so much great art if we didn't have obnoxious men.
No, that's not the case. We'd have better art. Imagine it.
I hope so. I think you're right. I'm dying to talk about the wasps. We haven't mentioned it yet, or you kind of did mention it. But there are 3 long sections of the poem. Each section of the poem is introduced by a short poem about a different kind of wasp. Not, a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, an actual wasp, a bug. Okay? A bug. The whole poem, you've got this book, right? You think, oh, it's it's another poem about a woman who works at a museum. I bet it's a lot about art. And so you begin, and the first poem is about a wasp who takes a cockroach and injects something into its brain, turns it into its zombie, and lays its eggs in its body. It's absolutely bizarre. You cannot break away from it.
So sorry. It is totally disgusting. I found it.
It is.
I read about this interaction, this insect interaction in Scientific America, and I was like, okay. It changed me as an artist, as a human.
How did the wasps get into the poem? How did the wasp take over the poem?
I do a lot of, I'm confessing now publicly, I do a lot of my writing by finding something really funny, daring myself to keep doing it, and then deciding that it should be done, that it's a bad joke that I need to run with. So I saw an article in Scientific America, I knew I had to write about it, I often write about animals, I love to do so.
This is all true, we should say, this thing you're describing about the zombie.
Oh yeah, who would invent that?
God.
Right. Evolution. It existed. I knew I wanted to write about it. I was very angry at the time, what was going on in the country, and decided that I could, without saying so, I could write a poem about, wouldn't it be great if a female wasp lays its egg in a cockroach? And I could just play this up, and it would be and then the cockroach would be mind controlled, because this is real, mind controlled by the wasp to incubate the eggs of the wasp so that she's generative and procreating, and the cockroach dies at her bidding, really, and then more wasps come. And this seemed to me like the perfect feminist metaphor without having to say it, staying as literal as I could, and just never looking away from it and not saying, oh, it means something else. It just is what it is. But I had a lot of ridiculous fun writing that poem. And that was over here. And then I was writing this thing that I had this joke about, the epic, over here.
About the museum.
Yes. And then I was asked to give a reading. and I didn't have a whole lot of material, and I was done trotting out my old poems. So I just stood in front of people and said the totally inauthentic thing of, oh, this is an invocation. You know, I'm writing an epic, and every epic needs a muse, and mine's this wasp. And then I liked it. I thought it was a great bad joke, so I thought, I bet I could find out more about parasitic wasps, and then I did. And it wasn't the feminist tale I thought it was. I thought that I could keep telling myself this story of there's this female wasp, she does this to this kind of animal, and she comes out triumphant. Her superpower is degeneration, and he's gone. And it didn't always turn out that way. It turns out that the natural world is just as messed up as the one we've created, and we are the natural world too. And so subsequently in the two other wasp poems, that the dynamic between the female wasp species became really upsetting and complicated to me. So there's a wasp who lays its eggs in an oak tree, and it creates an oak gall, and it doesn't hurt the tree much, and like that's cool and fine. But sometimes another wasp parasitizes the first wasp, and that baby is born to eat the baby of the original wasp. So this competition between who's laying their eggs, and this seemed to me much more dangerous than the gender dynamic that I thought that I wanted to write about. And then it intensified further. And the third wasp poem is about a wasp species that takes over the nest of another wasp species and just lets that original paper wasp make a nest and get everything ready, do all the work, and then wasp B just swoops in, kills the queen, and takes over the nest. And one of the amazing things, and I was like, I'm writing about American history, or maybe world history, but I'll just call it wasps, was that there's something biological in the chemistry of these structures, that the drone and worker wasps will take care of the invader's wasp's eggs first, because she has been evolved out of even being able to care for her own babies. And this just sounded like exactly what it is. Colonialism, right? Like, there we go. There's already a civilization, and somebody else comes and just steals it, and then somehow gets those individuals, in this case wasps, to take care of the invading species, babies.
It's astonishing.
We didn't make this up, it turns out.
Right. And of course it plays right into the history of classical art, which you do throughout the poem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are wasps and bees all over classical art.
Right. And the metaphor also works very well. At one point, you're asked, do you believe in God? And you answer, I believe in the elemental attunement of wasps. Yeah. The objects in the museum, and when you go to the museum, when you go to the Met or one of the big museums here in town, it just seems so set, so permanent, so eternal. But what your poem discloses is that it's constantly in motion.
Yeah.
And there's a tremendous amount of decay going on, and that people are fighting back against this all the time. I mean, it's kind of a war zone of a museum to keep these things looking
I guess
stable.
so, yeah. It's great theater.
If you'd read this section here.
Okay. How to guarantee against repossession by the natural world. First, isolate the object in a microclimate that replaces oxygen with unbreathable air, like the helium the Declaration of Independence is suspended in at the National Archives, such that its inside voice is of a child who just huffed the last balloon she brought home from a party where the eldest brother of the birthday boy pinned her down and spit and sucked his slobber back, then wait for insects to drop from the object dead. Be careful to be thorough. Carcasses provide nutrition for newcomers who will tunnel through the wood for years, eating hidden networks of dust-filled trenches into any wooden object. It will seem intact, but is as nearly hollow as so much poetry. But then, this touches me. The process of restoration is to feed a strip of paper through the channel. Thus, insect damage is filled in with the product of the inspiration of insect craft, the mafioso whiff of which, such that when the force protecting you is the same you need protection from, that fundamental essence of religion, law, and politics moves me so much, I would like to handwrite a cursor blessing along the paper that's fed into that void. Just a simple line like dialogue ribboning out of the mouth of a saint in the margin of a book of hours to mail into the narrow pass blasted by the course of life that runs inside all things. But what to write?
Thank you. Can you explain that, the irony there, and why it's so touching that these bugs make channels in the woods, and then restorers fill it with paper, which was inspired by bugs? Can you explain all the science behind that?
Maybe.
Yeah.
So as I understand it, and this could be just, sort of apocryphal information, but that we have paper because it was observed by the ancients that wasps made paper, and whoa, maybe we could do that. How could we pulp something too and turn that into a technology? So that's one thing. It is also the case that these same insects who make these elaborate nests, in order to do so, they're pulping by eating through wooden things.
Like valuable furniture in museums.
Exactly. And I thought it was ironic to think that we fill it, so then apparently in conservation world, you would fill in that hollow with paper. And that just seemed like the big joke of the wasp, really. And then the next level up joke is I was writing on paper while I was talking about that.
Right.
So I don't know, they're just like a kind of colliding ironies, I guess.
Yeah, and that the wasps, the destruction of the artwork and the artwork itself seem much more of a piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a sort of touching way. You talk so much about pigments and the material of art in a way that, I guess in art history you'd think about this, but most of us just look at these things, and you make me aware of it. When I read the poem, I was thinking much more about the pigments and the frames and everything that's the material of the painting, the physical elements, and that they're always tied to biology. They're always tied to economies. They're people that had to make those things.
Yeah.
But that's never in the little card next to the painting.
No, and some of the people die getting pigments. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're on it.
We look at something, vermilion, and people died in order to harvest and mine the material in order to make these paints. Or cochineal is a little bug that happens to contain, I think it's called carminic acid, something like this. If you squeeze one, it comes out, and that became this incredibly important dye that it's like in the sort of age of imperialism and global economy, they're trading art materials, and civilizations are falling for this art. And you look at something like a Rembrandt, and it's like this amazing color, and it's interesting to me to think of what makes the art incredible and transcendent, and the word we like to use is beautiful and meaningful,
right.
But also it's collaborative and with all of the life lost and wasted to make that material, but it doesn't make me not want to see that art. And it's
right.
just this everlasting, ongoing ethical conflict that is not just about art making, but I think about being anywhere on this planet and doing the things that we want to do, and participating fully is at the expense of something else, someone else.
Many people have been rendered invisible.
Yeah.
It made me feel a little angry about museums and the way they conspire in this process of making these works of art seem like they're just isolated things that just came out of the of nowhere.
Yeah.
And there they are on the wall, and they're valuable and beautiful, but all the attachments, all the costs of them have been rendered invisible to us.
Yeah, I think museums are changing a little bit too, though.
I hope so.
I hope so.
This passage refers just to what you were talking about, those little bugs and this,
Oh, yeah.
pigment.
How I love to touch this world. Its cactus spines and parasites, its cochineal from whose tiny steadfast bodies, born starving like all of us, derives the reddest dread. They hatch almost immediately from a clutch of eggs laid while their mother's mouth was stuck inside the host, then crawl in a fog toward the edge of the cactus, where by chance the wind catches their bristles as it does the sails of a galleon and distributes them among nearby cacti where they lodge their new faces into cactus flesh and never move again, spending their whole lives feeding and dreaming I don't know what, feeling, if they feel, the feel of rain and ancient dirt and deadly sun and the intrinsic longings of their kind, even as they swell in perpetual fulfillment. Press one like this, between thumb and forefinger, and out comes their one self-defense, carminic acid, a foul humor that turns off in ants an instinct to otherwise eat such easy marks, leaving my fingers, though it isn't blood, looking like I stopped a nosebleed. If I wiped across your shirt, would remain color fast there, the luster of bloodthirst for the next 6 centuries, while other red dye stuffs are fugitive. Something of the violence with which the mouth part of cochineal embeds in cactus and the lust we share to crush it gleams in the red dress of Rembrandt's Jewish bride, its palpable transactional monomaniacal hunger, same as the red of the redcoats who are coming yet all over everything they touch, and the American flag Key would see in the dawn's early light, lording it over Fort McHenry, though he wouldn't have known it, shriveled, raided, traded dead, listed by the ton on the manifest of Spanish fleets, overtaken by privateers and pirates, and finally ground to dust by some Dutchman presuming himself grinding dried berries of New Spain, the conquest of which is inferred in every stroke of red laid by any old master liquid enough to buy it, in the insect on its back quality of flailing limbs feeling up the torso of that bride. Rembrandt recollects in red with so much life it hemorrhages an infestation.
The way you move from the very teeny, unimportant, to the very big and important over and over again in this poem, from things that seem inconsequential to enormous themes of history, is awesome.
Thank you.
You note, it's an old tradition to wash money in fine art.
It is.
Must be curators, museum curators must think about that all the
I'm
time.
sure, yeah.
You quote Balzac saying, behind every great fortune is a great crime. Behind every great hoard into which the fortune pools, a slaughterhouse. Early in the poem, when you're describing that giant urn of flowers at the information desk, some of you have been to the museum, you remember that, you say that it's a reminder that art is mourning. What do you mean by that? Mourning as in grief, not as in early in the day.
Yeah. There are a lot of reasons people make art. One of the reasons is to stabilize a moment. And the moment moves so quickly, it's over. And the history of the lyric poem, and even thinking about the sonnet, it's a moment's monument or something, is what it said. And these small gestures toward moments that were is always more. In some ways, I think every poem is an elegy. It's deeply invested in something that already happened. So that, like, on that very level of thinking about time, but I think I was thinking at that time of art is mourning because of all of this horror that we're talking about. And once I started looking and then looking and deeper, it's just hard to look at this stuff and not think about death and the ways that humans have treated other humans forever, everywhere.
As you say, it doesn't invalidate the beauty of the art.
No, it doesn't.
It complicates it
It does.
tremendously.
Yeah.
We've reached the end of the day at the museum, and now we have to get hundreds, maybe thousands of people out of the building. Some of them are weird. Some of them are hiding.
They are.
We'll end with this.
Thank you. But how to exit the museum? Each day during the final 10 minutes, the museum is open. The army of museum guards surfaces from within the maze, creeping around statuary and columns and inches in slow motion down the great steps in formation, using the polar magnetic push of their uniformed bodies to repel visitors from the galleries in a closing time sweep. They stream from all directions into the great hall, down every pillaged earth corridor of goods, hammered, blessed, blown, ground, dyed, smuggled, lacquered, carved, painted, threaded, sold, stolen, polished, given, and cursed, and hold themselves there in a circle around the information desk until every visitor's gone and the locked doors deadbolted again. Like the Rockettes, my boss said the first day I worked the desk. They circled us. He said they'll dance a kick line now before clocking out, and I believed him. And thus, I remember them dancing. I remember anticipating the dance, and the high kicks I imagined I remember because I anticipated with my eyes. They were in perfect formation, kicking, my whole soul against the glass, behind which the next moment is, and the past, where they would and would have danced, but of course they would not and did not and still are. Thank you. And thank you for your questions. It's very moving to be in conversation with you.
That was wonderful. We went really fast through a long, complicated poem, which now you must buy a copy of in the back of the room and enjoy at your own leisure. You really will be dazzled by this poem. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking to you about this.
Thank you. My pleasure, too.
And you'll sign copies back there,
I'm
too.
delighted.
Yes, you'd be happy to.
Thank you.